What is harmony? Harmony occurs when two notes of different pitches are played together. However, it's a bit more complicated than that. When we think of harmony, we usually mean the notes that accompany the melody. Harmony has the power to make the melody richer and more emotional. What is tonality? Tonality means that the music belongs to a key. It is built mainly from the notes of a particular scale. The strongest note in any scale is the tonic. This has an effect on the other notes in the scale, and in tonal music there is always the feeling that the music needs to end on the tonic. This also applies to the harmony, since the chords are built on notes of the scale. Generally speaking, though, we can describe tonality as being either major, minor, or atonal. Key signature. Key signatures tell us the notes of the scale. Here we have an A major key signature with an A major scale written out. The key signature tells us that every time we see a note written on the F line or space, we must play an F sharp. Every time we see a note written on the C line or space, we must play it as a C sharp. And every time we see a note written on the G line or space, we must play it as a G sharp. Major. A major scale will always follow this pattern: tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. What we mean by this is the interval between each note of the scale. We could represent it in a few ways. The first is by writing the scale down on a stave and marking off the tones and semitones. The second is by showing the notes on a keyboard and marking off the tones and semitones. What makes a chord major is the distance between the root and the third. In a C major chord, the third is not flattened, nor is it sharpened. This interval is called a major third. The major third is exactly 4 semitones above the bottom note. Here is a C major triad. Notice how, if we count up from the root, we end up on 3. Degrees of the major scale. There are names given to each note of the major scale. We also give Roman numerals to each note of the major scale, that are as follows. The first note is called the tonic, the second note is called the supertonic, the third is known as the mediant, the fourth is the subdominant, the fifth is the dominant, the sixth is the submediant, and the seventh degree of the major scale is known as the leading note. Remember that the leading note is always a semitone away from the tonic. Minor. We'll go over two common types of minor scale. The first is the natural minor. The intervals of the scale are as follows: tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone. Here is a C natural minor scale. The next type of minor scale that we'll look at is the harmonic minor. Its intervals follow this pattern: tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, semitone, semitone. Here is a C harmonic minor. Notice how in both scales the third note was flattened. This is what we call the minor third, and is what makes it minor. If we build a C triad with an E flat, then we have a C minor chord. A minor third is equal to exactly 3 semitones. Atonal. Atonal music is music that does not have a specific key. The best way to describe this would be to say that there is no tonic. The tonic is the name given to the first note in the scale, and is the anchor point for harmonies. Consonant. Consonant simply means that the harmony and melody notes sound pleasant. Generally speaking, diatonic harmony is consonant. The following example of an oboe playing a melody accompanied by piano could be described as being consonant. Notice how there are no sharps or flats, only notes from the key signature are being used. The same applies to the melody, and the melody is built using mostly chord tones. Those are the notes that make up the chord. The harmony in this example is diatonic. Dissonant. Dissonant music uses clashing notes and harmonies to create tension. The following example is a brass section. Notice how the middle of the phrase sounds like it needs to keep moving in order to sound finished. This is also an example of chromatic harmony, as the flats and sharps are not part of the key signature. In this case, the key signature is C major, which should have no flats or sharps in it. Diatonic harmony. Diatonic harmony uses only notes of the scale to build chords. The scale is dictated by our key signature. So, if I have a C major scale, and I want to build a chord on the 6th degree of the scale, then I can only use the notes of the C major scale to build that chord. The 6th chord of any major key will always be a minor chord. This is why. The 6th degree of the C major scale is A. We want to build a triad above A, so we need to add a 3rd and 5th above A. We start with the 3rd, however, there is no C sharp available to us in the C major scale. We can only add a C natural above the A. This happens to be a minor 3rd above A. We now need to add a 5th above the A. We can do this because a 5th above A is E natural, and our C major scale has an E natural in it. Chromatic harmony. Chromatic harmony makes use of notes not included in the key signature and not included in the scale. If we take the previous example, but this time write an A major chord in a C major key signature, then we have used chromatic harmony. This is because C sharp is a major 3rd above A and is needed to write an A major triad. C sharp, however, is not included in the C major key signature. Triad. A triad is a 3-note chord. We build triads using the 1st, which is also known as the root, 3rd, and 5th degrees of the scale, although they don't have to be in that order. We can have what we call inversions of the chords. If we build a triad in the order of 1st, 3rd, and 5th, then we have what is known as a root position triad. If we start with the 3rd, then have the 5th, and move to the root an octave above, we have what is known as a first inversion triad. If we start with the 5th, then have the root, and then place the 3rd an octave above, we have what is known as a second inversion triad. Quartal chord. A quartal chord is a chord of 4 notes. Dominant 7th. A dominant 7th is an example of a quartal chord. The dominant 7th is built on the 5th of the scale. That is to say that the 5th, or the dominant of the major scale, is the root of the chord. In D major, the dominant 7th would be built on an A. The chord is built much like a triad, using the root, 3rd, and 5th. However, we add the flat 7th above the 5th. You might be wondering how the G is a flat 7th without having a flat symbol placed before it. This is because the note of G is a tone away from the note of A. Tierce de Picardy. A tierce de Picardy, simply put, is when a piece of music in a minor tonality ends with a major chord. Pedal note. A pedal note is a sustained or repeated note that is played while the harmonies change. Pedal notes can be doubled by other instruments. You need to listen carefully to the harmony, because it must change to at least one other chord. If the chords don't change, then it is not a pedal note. Notice how in the 3rd bar the pedal note has been doubled an octave above. Drone. A drone is played in the bass. It can be just one note, like a pedal note, but often is 2 notes played together. Think of the sustained notes played by a bagpipe that accompany the melody. The 2 notes in the drone could be any distance apart, but in this example they are a fifth apart. Here we have a drone in the bassoon accompanying a folk melody played on the piccolo. Whole tone scale. The whole tone scale is made up of notes a tone apart from each other. Here we have a whole tone scale starting on the note of E. Pentatonic scale. The pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale. There is a major and minor pentatonic scale. The major pentatonic scale is made up of the following notes of the major scale: 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. The minor pentatonic scale is made up from the following notes of the minor scale: 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7. Blues scale. Blues scales use something we call blue notes. A blue note is a note that has been flattened by a semitone. They usually occur on the 3rd, 5th, and 7th. This C blues scale contains all 3 blue notes. However, note how the G natural is also included. Chromatic scale. The chromatic scale is a scale where every note is a semitone away from the note before and after it. Here is a chromatic scale starting on C. Modes. A mode is a type of scale created by establishing a new tonic within a pre-existing scale. This is to say that we could play all the notes of a C major scale just starting from a different point in the scale. Here we have a mode starting on the 5th of the major scale and is known as the Mixolydian mode. The names of the modes of the major scale are as follows: Ionian, also known as the major scale. This starts on the tonic, or the first note of the scale. Dorian. This starts on the supertonic, or the second note of the scale. Phrygian. This starts on the mediant, or the third note of the scale. Lydian. This starts on the subdominant, or the fourth note of the scale. Mixolydian. This starts on the dominant, or the fifth note of the scale. Aeolian. This starts on the submediant, or the sixth note of the scale. Locrian. This starts on the leading note, or the seventh note of the scale. Cadence. A cadence is a way of describing an interaction between two chords, and how they relate to each other harmonically. It is good to think of cadences as a sort of musical grammar, where they can create full stops at the end of phrases, or where they can create commas in the middle of phrases. When we look at any major scale, we can assign Roman numerals to each note or degree of the scale. These numbers are also descriptions of the diatonic chords that exist within the scale or key signature. Here we have a C major scale with the Roman numerals below each note. On each note, a triad has been built. Note how major chords are labeled with capital letter Roman numerals, and minor chords are labeled with lowercase Roman numerals. Perfect cadence. A perfect cadence will usually happen at the end of a phrase, much like a full stop. The chord progression of a perfect cadence is chord 5 to chord 1. Imperfect cadence. An imperfect cadence is the opposite of a perfect cadence. It ends on the 5 chord, and there are several variations. The chord progression of an imperfect cadence could be chord 1 to chord 5, chord 2 to chord 5, or chord 4 to chord 5. Plagal cadence. A plagal cadence is also known as the Amen cadence. This is because of its wide use in sacred music. The chord progression of a plagal cadence is chord 4 to chord 1. Interrupted cadence. An interrupted cadence is the most incomplete sounding cadence and could be thought of as a musical comma. Its chord progression is chord 5 to chord 6. Modulation. A modulation is where the piece of music changes key. The music can also modulate to either the relative major or relative minor. Here, the music modulates to the dominant. That is to say that the original key of A major modulates to E major in bar 5. Relative minor. A relative minor shares the same key signature as its relative major key, but is instead minor. To calculate the relative minor of a major key, all you need to do is count up to the 6th degree of the scale, and you'll have the tonic of the relative minor. For example, in C major, the 6th note of the scale is an A. This means that C major's relative minor is A minor, and also that A minor shares the same key signature as C major. Relative major. The relative major works on the same principle as the relative minor, except that instead of counting up the scale to the 6th degree, you'll need to count up to the 3rd degree. So, in the key of G minor, the 3rd degree of the scale is B flat. That means that B flat is the relative major of G minor. If you'd like to move on to Area of Study 3, Texture and Melody, then click up here. If you'd like something completely different, then click on this icon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.